I stared at my reflection in the old hallway mirror, the one that had witnessed 50 years of my life in this house. The wrinkles around my eyes looked deeper today, but it wasn't age. It was the weight of a discovery I still couldn't fully process. My daughter, Isabel, had just left, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume and poisonous words that still echoed through the halls. "Mom, you have to understand. I'm young. I have a life ahead of me. You've already lived yours. 62 years. Was that all I meant to her? A chapter completed, an obstacle in the way of her happiness? I walked into the kitchen where we had shared so many mornings together, where she used to do her homework while I prepared breakfast before school. The wooden table still bore the marks of the pencils she once used to draw when she was a child. I didn't yet know that this would be one of the last mornings in this house. That the papers scattered on the living room table, papers I had ignored, thinking they were just wedding arrangements, were actually the death sentence of the only home I had ever known as an adult. The doorbell rang. It was Nathan, my son-in-law, with his usual confident, almost arrogant demeanor. Tall, sharply dressed, one of those men who could persuade anyone of anything. Isabel followed a few steps behind him, avoiding my eyes. "Mrs. Collins," he said, adjusting his Italian tie, "we need to talk about your situation." My situation, as if I were a problem to be solved. "Sit down, Mom," Isabel said, pointing to my own armchair, the one where I used to read every night. There was something different in her voice now, colder, calculated. "We've been thinking about your future." Nathan opened a genuine leather briefcase and spread documents across the coffee table. Numbers, clauses, terms danced before my eyes like indecipherable hieroglyphs. "You see, you're not getting any younger," he began, in that condescending tone I had learned to recognize. "This house is far too big for one person. The property taxes, the upkeep, the security, it's a lot of responsibility." Isabel nodded eagerly, like a porcelain doll. "It's true, Mom, and we've found the perfect solution. There's a beautiful senior residence downtown. You're going to love it. Activities, people your age." She exchanged a quick glance with Nathan, as if they were following a rehearsed script. Then she leaned forward and, with a coldness I will never forget, said, "Mom, find another home. I needed the money for my honeymoon, so I'm going to sell your house." The words hit my chest like stones. The house where I raised my daughter, where I built my life, reduced to nothing more than financing her luxuries. A senior residence? The words left my mouth like stones. "You want to put me away?" "It's not putting you away, Mom. It's relocating you to a more appropriate environment." Nathan leaned forward, adopting the posture of a man who believed he was doing me a favor. "Mrs. Collins, Isabel and I are getting married next month. We need some starting capital to build our life together. This house is worth quite a lot in today's market." "Quite a lot," I repeated, feeling the ground open beneath my feet. "Exactly. And since you're my mother-in-law, I thought of making a fair offer. We'll buy the house, handle all the paperwork, and you'll be free of those burdens." Free. What an interesting word to describe eviction. In the following days, Isabel intensified her campaign. She came every morning with colorful brochures from senior communities and seemingly logical arguments about how I would be so much happier away from here. "Mom, look at this garden," she'd say, showing me pictures of a place that looked more like a disguised hospital. "And they have nurses on call 24/7. You'll never have to worry about getting sick at night again." "I don't get sick at night, Isabel." "Not yet. But what if it happens? Who will help you here, all alone?" Nathan would show up in the late afternoons, always with more papers and new urgencies. "Mrs. Collins, there's a very interested buyer, but we need to move fast. The market is hot." I didn't yet know there was no buyer. that they had already calculated exactly how much they needed for Isabel's 3-week honeymoon in Europe, planned down to the smallest detail. One night, while flipping through old family photos, I found a letter Isabel had written when she was 15, during a difficult financial time after my husband passed away. Mom, thank you for never letting me go without. When I grow up, I'll take care of you the way you've taken care of me. I promise I'll never abandon you. The girl who had written those words had completely vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating version of my daughter I barely recognized. For the first time in months, I cried, not only for the betrayal, but for the death of the daughter I thought I had raised. It was on a Thursday that I discovered the extent of the betrayal. Isabel had forgotten her handbag on the kitchen table when she rushed out to some urgent appointment. Her phone kept ringing until, worried, I finally answered. It was Nathan's impatient voice. Isabel, did you get the old woman's signature? The notary is waiting for the paperwork today? My blood froze. Old woman. That's how he referred to me. And what signature? Nathan, this is Mrs. Collins speaking. A heavy silence hung on the other end. Ah, Mrs. Collins. I was talking about other documents. A misunderstanding. What documents, Nathan? What notary? Look, you wouldn't understand. Complicated real estate matters. I hung up, my hands shaking. I ran to the living room table, where Isabel always left her papers scattered, and for the first time examined everything closely. My heart stopped. Draft contracts, an appraisal already completed, and a blank power of attorney with my name typed at the top, waiting only for my signature. They hadn't forged anything yet, but they were preparing to that very day. What I hadn't expected was to find, in the same folder, their entire plan, to sell my house for 40% of its market value to themselves, using a power of attorney I was supposed to voluntarily sign after enough psychological pressure. I sank heavily into the armchair, clutching the papers with trembling hands, rage and despair burning inside me. 50 years of my life reduced to a fraudulent scheme to finance a honeymoon. The next morning, Isabel arrived with her rehearsed smile, an expensive pen in her hand, and more glossy brochures from that so-called residence. Mom, I brought the last documents for you to sign. They're just formalities. I watched her in silence, studying every expression, every gesture. The power of attorney was there, mixed in with other papers carefully arranged to look routine. Isabel, I said calmly, I'm not signing anything. I saw her mask slip for just a moment. What do you mean, Mom? These are just the residence forms. Don't lie to me. I saw the power of attorney. I saw the appraisal. I know exactly what you're planning. The silence that followed was deafening. Isabel looked at the papers as if they were venomous snakes ready to strike. Mom, you don't understand. This is for your own good. For my good? Or for the good of your honeymoon. You heard the phone call, she said, no longer pretending. So you know you don't really have a choice. Something broke inside me at that moment. The daughter I had protected, raised, loved unconditionally was now suggesting that I was mentally incapable of defending my own rights. Get out of my house, I said, with a firmness that surprised even me. Mom, don't be dramatic. Out! Isabel recoiled, as if I had struck her. I had never shouted at her before. I had never truly imposed limits. Fine, she said, quickly putting her mask back on. But you'll have to leave anyway. The papers are already signed. The sale is being processed. After she left, I walked through the empty house, touching each piece of furniture, each wall, as if saying goodbye. But something had changed. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a victim. I woke the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer the compliant, permissive mother I had always been. I was the woman who had built a life, who had raised a daughter alone after becoming a widow, who had worked 3 jobs to give Isabel a good education. I called Claudia, My college friend who had become a lawyer. We hadn't spoken in months, but she answered on the second ring. "Joan, what a wonderful surprise." "Claudia, I need help, and not the social kind." 2 hours later, Claudia was sitting in my living room, examining the documents with a face that grew more serious by the minute. "This is document forgery, Joan, a crime against public administration, not to mention fraud and misappropriation. Can it be reversed? Not just reversed, we can prosecute criminally." A shiver ran down my spine. "She's my daughter, Claudia." "So what? A crime is a crime. Do you want her to keep believing she can get away with this?" She was right. Isabel had crossed a line from which there was no return. I had spent my entire life shielding her from the consequences of her own actions. What do I need to do? First, we go to the notary's office where the authentication was supposedly done, then to the police. We'll prove that signature is fake. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not a sad or resigned smile, but the smile of someone about to take back control of her life. "Claudia, do you have time now?" "For this, I have the whole day." The notary's office was across town, in a commercial building I had never visited before. The notary, Mr. Howard Grant, received us with the professional courtesy typical of someone who handles important documents every day. "Of course I remember," he said, consulting his records. A very polite young woman brought in the paperwork. She said her mother was unable to come in person due to health issues. Claudia exchanged a meaningful glance with me. "Did you verify her identity?" "Naturally." She presented her mother's ID and Social Security card, along with a power of attorney. "What power of attorney?" I interrupted. Mr. Grant flipped through his files and pulled out a copy. It was a power of attorney that I had supposedly signed, giving Isabel full rights to represent me in real estate matters. Another forged signature. "Sir," Claudia said in her seasoned lawyer's voice, "my client categorically states she never signed this document and never visited this notary. We'd like to request a handwriting analysis." The color drained from the notary's face. "But she presented all the documents." "Documents that anyone can photocopy," Claudia replied sharply. "Do you have security cameras?" "Yes. We'll need the footage from that day." We left the office with an official copy of the request for forensic analysis and the promise that the recordings would be preserved. In the car, Claudia looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Joan, are you sure you want to take this all the way? Isabel could go to prison." I thought of the 15-year-old girl who had once promised to take care of me. Then I thought of the woman who had tried to put me away to steal my house. She's already made her choice, Claudia. Now it's time for me to make mine. Claudia wasn't my only ally. Over the next week, I discovered Isabel had completely underestimated my social network and the impression her behavior was leaving on others. Mrs. Harper, my neighbor of 20 years, showed up at my door with a carrot cake and a piece of priceless information. "Joan, I overheard that Nathan on the phone the other day. He was in the yard, thinking no one could hear." She lowered her voice as if we were conspiring. "He was talking about liquidating the old woman's assets to finance not just the honeymoon, but an apartment in Miami." Miami. They didn't just want my house. They wanted to start a new life in the United States with the money from the sale. Dr. Stevens, my physician for 15 years, called after hearing about the situation through the neighborhood gossip chain. "Joan, if you need a medical statement confirming your full mental capacity, I'll gladly provide one. Your tests are excellent, and your lucidity is unquestionable. No court would ever doubt your competence." Even Father Thomas, the priest at my church, offered his support. "My child, honoring your father and mother isn't just a commandment. It's the foundation of a civilized society. What Isabel is doing is not just a crime, it's a sin against nature." I was no longer alone. I had an entire community outraged by the situation and ready to back me up. The change was visible. I began dressing better, walking upright again. I went back to wearing red lipstick, the one I had abandoned when Isabel told me that women my age shouldn't wear flashy colors. For the first time in years, I felt beautiful, powerful, ready to fight. Isabel showed up on Friday, more nervous than usual. Something in her posture had changed, less confident, more defensive. "Mom, I heard you've been doing unnecessary investigations." "Necessary investigations," I corrected, "about my own house." Nathan appeared behind her, and for the first time I saw cracks in his gentleman facade. He was visibly irritated. "Mrs. Collins, you're complicating a situation that was already resolved. This isn't good for anyone." "It's especially not good for you," I replied, feeling a strange calm wash over me. Isabel tried to regain control of the conversation. "Mom, you're being manipulated by these people. That lawyer friend of yours just wants to make money off our family." "Our family?" I laughed bitterly. "Isabel, you forged my signature to steal my house. Do we still have a family?" "I didn't forge anything," she screamed, completely losing her composure. "You did sign. You're just getting senile and don't remember." That was the final straw. "Senile?" My voice came out low, dangerous. "Senile enough not to notice you opened a joint bank account in my name to make transferring the money easier? Senile enough not to realize you've already bought tickets to Miami?" The silence that followed was absolute. Isabel and Nathan looked at each other like cornered animals. "How did you know?" Isabel began, then stopped, realizing she had given herself away. "I know a lot, my dear. Including the fact that you've already spent $15,000 of money you don't even have yet. Money you will never get." Nathan stepped forward, and for the first time, I saw something truly threatening in his stance. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Mrs. Collins." "No," I replied calmly. "You don't." The following Monday, Claudia arrived at my house carrying a heavy leather folder pressed tightly against her chest. I could tell, even before she spoke, that the contents were important. She set it carefully on my dining table, opened it with deliberate slowness, and revealed the documents inside as though unveiling a secret. "The handwriting analysis is back," she announced, her eyes fixed on mine. "It confirms what we already knew. These signatures, every single one of them, are blatant forgeries. Joan, we now have more than suspicion. We have proof, solid, irrefutable proof." My breath caught in my throat. For weeks I had been living in a haze of fear and doubt, asking myself if anyone would ever believe me. Now, in black ink and official seals, was validation. But Claudia wasn't finished. Her lips curved into something between a smile and a grim line of satisfaction. "There's more. Did you know your house has been officially appraised at $800,000? My hand gripped the edge of the chair. $800,000? She nodded. "And do you know what Nathan and Isabel tried to do? They prepared paperwork valuing the house at $320,000, less than half its worth. This isn't just fraud, it's predatory exploitation, a calculated attempt to strip you of everything under the disguise of formality." I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. The betrayal was deeper than I had even imagined. My daughter hadn't been blind or naive. She had known precisely what she was doing. Claudia placed another document in front of me, this one stamped with the court's insignia. "I filed for an emergency injunction, effective immediately. Any attempt to transfer or sell this property is frozen. Legally, the house remains yours. They can't touch it." Relief washed over me like cool water on burned skin. But the moment was cut short by the ringing of the phone. The screen lit up with Isabel's name. Her voice on the other end was shaky, panicked. "Mom, I need to talk to you, urgently." "You can talk now," I replied coldly. "No, face to face. Please, it's important." An hour later, she appeared at my door. Gone was the icy mask of control she had worn for months. Her hands trembled as she clutched her handbag, her mascara smeared from crying. "Mom," she began breathlessly, "this is all a misunderstanding. Nathan told me, he convinced me, it was for your safety, for your happiness. He said—" I cut her short, my voice sharper than steel. "Do not lay this at Nathan's feet. You forged my signature, Isabel. That was not his choice, it was yours." Tears streamed down her face. "I know I made mistakes, but you're my mother. You can't destroy my life like this." "I can," I said with finality, "and I will." Her sobs turned to desperation. "If you prosecute me, I'll lose everything. Nathan will leave me." And in that moment, her truth spilled out, not remorse for betraying me, but fear of losing him. I studied her face, seeing clearly for the first time. "Perhaps," I said softly, "it's better to learn the truth about Nathan before binding yourself to him forever." The days that followed unfolded like a storm tightening around Isabel and Nathan. Their carefully constructed facade began to unravel thread by thread. 2 nights later, Isabel called me again, her voice broken. "He's gone, Mom. Nathan left me. He said he can't be tied to a family with legal problems. He canceled everything, the wedding, the honeymoon, all of it. He told me I should have handled you more, efficiently." That word, efficiently, cut through me like a blade. Efficient, as if I were nothing more than an obstacle on a construction site, to be bulldozed aside. "Isabel," I said quietly, "don't you see what happened? You didn't lose Nathan because of me. You lost him because he never truly loved you. He only loved the money." But Isabel wasn't ready to accept truth. "No, Mom, I lost everything because of you, because you refused to just let go." My heart ached, but my voice remained steady. "No, Isabel. You discovered who Nathan truly was before you signed your life away to him. Whether you realize it or not, I saved you from a lifetime of chains." She hung up without a word. 2 days later, I heard the crunch of tires on my driveway. When I opened the door, Isabel stood there flanked by Nathan and 2 strangers, a tall man in an expensive suit, his leather briefcase gleaming, and a woman in her 50s with a clipped, professional demeanor. "Mom," Isabel said, her tone brittle, "this is Dr. Reynolds, a psychiatrist, and Ms. Carter, a social worker. They've come to evaluate your condition." My blood ran cold. This was their final weapon, to strip me not just of my house, but of my very agency, my mind, my independence. Dr. Reynolds extended his hand with a smile too polished to be sincere. "Mrs. Collins, I understand you've been experiencing certain episodes, paranoia, confusion, difficulty remembering details. We'd like to conduct a quick, informal evaluation." But Claudia had warned me this might happen. Her coaching steadied my nerves like armor. I folded my arms and met his gaze. "Isabel," I said evenly, "you have 2 choices. Stop this charade now, or I go directly to the police and report you both for attempted fraud and elder abuse." Her eyes widened. "You wouldn't dare!" "Test me." Right then, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the tension. Claudia stepped inside, her heels clicking like gavel strikes, with Dr. Stevens right behind her. Isabel's face blanched. "Good morning," Claudia said, her tone formal and sharp. "I understand there was an attempt to coerce my client into signing documents under psychological pressure?" Isabel stammered. "No one coerced anyone." Claudia cut her off, voice like steel. "We have yesterday's phone call recorded, along with the forged paperwork. That's more than enough to press charges." It was a bluff, but an effective one. Isabel's knees buckled as her carefully stacked lies collapsed around her. Nathan's jaw tightened. For the first time, his polished arrogance cracked, revealing the predator underneath. No signature had been stolen yet, no deed had been transferred, but the intent, the preparation, the conspiracy, it was all documented. The storm had turned against them. The legal wheels began turning faster than I could have imagined. The district attorney's office accepted the case almost immediately. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged signatures, fraudulent evaluations, recorded phone calls, witness testimony. Isabel was formally indicted on charges of attempted fraud, coercion of an elder, and misappropriation of property documents. Nathan, whose past record of financial crimes had already put him on the authorities' radar, was named co-conspirator. His charming exterior could no longer protect him from his history. The first day of court felt surreal. I sat on one side of the courtroom, my hands steady despite the weight of the moment. On the other side, Isabel and Nathan sat at the defense table, their polished facades stripped away under fluorescent lights. Isabel's eyes darted nervously around the room. Nathan's expression was tight, his jaw clenched, but his arrogance had dulled into something desperate. Judge David Miller, stern but fair, presided from the bench. His presence was commanding, yet calm, a reminder that justice, though slow, was real. When it was my turn to testify, I rose with a strength I hadn't known in years. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and unwavering, "I'm not here for revenge. I am here for justice, not just for myself, but for every elder who lives in fear of being silenced, manipulated, or discarded by those they trust most." Isabel wept silently, but I knew her tears were not repentance. They were self-pity, the mourning of her own downfall. The prosecutor laid out the evidence meticulously: the forged power of attorney, the fraudulent appraisal, the notarized lies. And then, as the final nail, he read aloud a letter Isabel had written at 15, a letter thanking me for sacrifices I had made, promising to always care for me, swearing she would never abandon me. "Your Honor," the prosecutor concluded, his voice heavy, "this case is not only about attempted theft, it is about moral collapse. When a daughter sees her mother not as family, but as a financial obstacle, we are not only facing fraud, we are facing a betrayal of society's most sacred bond." The verdict came swiftly. Isabel was sentenced to 2 years in open-regime prison, with damages and mandatory community service in institutions for seniors. Nathan, due to his prior convictions, received 4 years in semi-open prison. But as I left the courthouse that day, I realized the true verdict had already been delivered, not by the judge, but within me. For the first time in years, I felt whole. I was no longer just a victim. I was Joan Collins, survivor, fighter, and woman reborn. 6 months after the trial, I would often walk through the corridors of my home with a strange sense of awe. The same walls that had once felt suffocating now breathed freedom back at me. Each crack in the plaster seemed like a scar, evidence of battles fought and survived. I began restoring the house slowly, not just as a dwelling, but as an act of reclaiming. I repainted the living room in soft cream tones, replaced heavy curtains with ones that let the morning sun flood in, and polished the wooden floorboards until they gleamed again. Every change was symbolic, a declaration that I had survived, that my story would no longer be written by others. But what gave me the deepest purpose was deciding the house would no longer be only mine. The bedrooms, once silent reminders of Isabel's absence, became spaces of transformation. With Claudia's legal expertise and the help of friends, we founded a support group for elders who had been betrayed financially by their own families. The very thought would have seemed too painful once, but now it became my mission. On Saturdays, my house came alive. Chairs circled the living room, the aroma of coffee and cake floated in the air, and voices, some trembling, some defiant, filled the silence that had haunted me for months. Stories poured out: a grandmother tricked into signing away her pension, a widower whose daughter emptied his savings, a retired teacher coerced into selling her apartment. Each confession felt like an echo of my own pain, yet every meeting ended with shared strategies, laughter, and even a little music. Healing, I realized, doesn't happen in solitude. It blooms in community. During this time, Isabel was serving her sentence in open regime. She was assigned to a senior charity center, and sometimes I pictured her there, feeding someone frail or listening to an old man's stories. I wondered if she saw my face in theirs. In the early months, she tried calling me, her number flashing across the screen, but I let it ring. Each silence was an act of self-respect I had denied myself for too long. Dr. Stevens once said to me, "Joan, forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's about deciding how much of your soul you will still allow it to occupy." Those words stayed with me. Slowly, I began to see Isabel as not only the villain in my story, but also a casualty of her own illusions, of Nathan's manipulation, of a society that whispers to children that aging parents are obstacles rather than treasures. Physically, my transformation was undeniable. I shed the cloak of invisibility I had worn. I bought dresses that flattered my figure, styled my silver hair into elegant waves, and wore my red lipstick with pride. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw a discarded widow. I saw Joan Collins, alive, radiant, unwilling to fade away. It was during one of the lectures hosted at my home that I met George Harris, a widower with kind blue eyes and the steady voice of a man who had once engineered bridges. He too had been betrayed by his children over inheritance. We began by exchanging sympathetic smiles, then conversations, then long walks after the meetings. One evening, as twilight painted the sky pink and gold, George turned to me and said, "You gave me back hope, Joan. You showed me that growing older doesn't mean surrendering. It means reclaiming perspective. 2 years is a long time when it is measured in humility." Isabel spent each day of her sentence scrubbing, serving, and caring for strangers in the senior charity program. I imagined her hearing the laughter of the elderly she once wanted to discard, smelling their medicine, listening to their regrets. Perhaps, in their faces, she finally recognized what she had almost destroyed in me. The day she knocked on my door is etched into my memory. I hesitated before opening, seeing her silhouette through the frosted glass. She stood hunched, no jewelry, no carefully applied makeup, no expensive perfume. Just a woman stripped of arrogance, carrying shame like a heavy garment. "Mom," she whispered when I opened the door, "may I come in?" We sat across from each other in the living room. The grandfather clock ticked like a metronome of truth. The silence between us stretched, almost unbearable. I waited, refusing to rescue her with small talk. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "I didn't come to beg for forgiveness. I came to thank you." "For what?" My voice was cool, cautious. "For not protecting me this time. For letting me fall so hard that I had no choice but to confront who I had become." She drew in a ragged breath. "Prison didn't break me. It revealed me. And you saved me from becoming worse." Her words pierced me deeper than any betrayal. My instinct as a mother was to soften, to gather her in my arms. But my instinct as a woman, the woman who had been almost erased, told me to stay still, to listen. We spoke for hours. Isabel told me of nights haunted by regret, of days where small kindnesses, combing an old lady's hair, listening to a war veteran's story, taught her humility. She confessed she sometimes cried into her pillow, asking herself how she had come to betray the very person who gave her life. "Nathan vanished," she admitted bitterly. "No letters, no visits, nothing. You were right, he never loved me. He only loved what I could take from you." "And now?" I asked softly. "Now I want a chance, not to erase the past. That's impossible. But to build something new. Not the old roles of manipulative daughter and permissive mother, but 2 women choosing to respect each other." Her words didn't erase the scars, but scars are proof of survival, not weakness. That evening, Isabel joined our support group for the first time. Her voice shook when she confessed, I convinced myself that my mother didn't need her house because she was old, that her age erased her right to independence, and that lie almost destroyed us both. The room fell silent, but that silence was different. It was the silence of people witnessing truth being born. 2 years after my ordeal began, I stood on a stage bathed in light, facing an audience of 200 at the University for Seniors. Behind me hung a banner, "Never Invisible Again: How I Overcame Family Abuse and Rediscovered My Strength." The spotlight was warm on my face, but my eyes found the first row, George smiling proudly, his hands folded in quiet support, and Isabel clutching a copy of my book as if it were both confession and redemption. "My story," I began, my voice carrying across the hall, "is not extraordinary. It is painfully common. Every day, seniors are stripped of dignity, silenced, pressured to surrender what is rightfully theirs, and far too often, it is their own families who do it. But today, I stand here as proof. It is never too late to say enough." The applause thundered, but I lifted my hand to continue. Isabel later stepped forward to speak. Her voice cracked, but she did not falter. "The greatest horror," she said, "was realizing I had erased my own mother's humanity. She was no longer a woman with dreams and rights in my eyes, just an obstacle. I will spend the rest of my life making sure no one else falls into that blindness." Claudia, now my partner in a law firm dedicated to elder rights, presented our results. Over 300 cases defended, 200 reconciliations, dozens of prosecutions. Yet the numbers couldn't capture the trembling gratitude of Mrs. Anderson, 78, when we stopped her grandchildren from seizing her pension. They didn't reflect Mr. Lewis's tears when he reclaimed his bank account after years of theft by his son. When the event ended, a frail woman approached me. Her hands shook as she held mine. "Mrs. Collins," she whispered, "I'm 75. My son wants me to sell my house so he can invest the money. After hearing your story, I know what to say." I hugged her tightly. "Yes, you do, and you are not alone." That sentence had become more than words. It was a shield, a banner, a movement. It adorned the cover of my book, the flyers of our organization, the lips of every survivor who stood up and declared, "Never again." After the applause faded, Isabel brought me a single red rose. "Mom," she said softly, "I may never undo the past, but today I am proud to be your daughter." "And I replied, pressing the rose to my chest, "am proud to finally live as the woman I always was, but had once forgotten to be." George offered me his arm, and together we walked out into the evening air. At the entrance, a plaque gleamed under the lights, the Joan Collins Support Center, because no elder will ever be invisible again. I ran my fingers over the letters, tears welling. At 64, I was no longer merely surviving. I was leaving a legacy. My reflection in the glass door showed not a fragile widow, but a warrior, luminous and unbreakable. The girl who once promised to care for me had broken that promise. But the woman I had become had forged a vow much greater, that no elder would ever again endure betrayal in silence. That vow, I knew, would live on beyond me. Because some victories are not private, they ripple into history. And my story was now the story of every elder who refuses invisibility. If you are reading this and recognize pieces of your own life, if you have felt dismissed, pressured, manipulated, or silenced because of your age, let my voice reach you now. You are not invisible. You are not disposable, and you are not alone. Raise your voice. Tell your story. Seek allies, whether in law, in community, or in faith. Do not accept silence as safety. Silence only feeds abuse. And if you are a son, daughter, or caregiver, remember, An elder's years are not a burden to be managed, but a crown of wisdom to be honored. Protect that crown. It will one day rest on your own head. My fight became a movement because I chose to speak. Yours can too. Share this story. Carry it to someone who needs it. Create ripples of resistance that no wave of greed can erase. Stand, speak, refuse invisibility, because dignity has no expiration date.